familiar with. But I really appreciate you coming here. This is an incredible event that they put together here to honor people, to honor diversity in education. And the fact that when I look around the room, that this is a diverse crowd is really exciting too. My name is Rockey Robbins. I work here in the community counseling program that we have. I'm Native American. I'm Choctaw and Cherokee. But people are typically used to me coming and talking about Indian things everywhere I go. I've got about, I think, 14 places I'm speaking this spring. And every one of them is for me to go around and tell people about Indians, you know. But this is one that the topic is just multicultural issues. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best not to talk about Indians today. But instead, I'm going to talk from a Native American perspective about diversity and what I've learned from interacting with people of different ethnic groups. And so it's going to be sort of from that perspective. And the theme of what I'm talking about is how we can thicken our own life experience and our own life stories by increasing our multicultural awareness. Aristotle asked the question about how we should live our lives. And I think if we live our lives in a way that allows us to be open to the uniquenesses and the unique perspectives, the different ways of being that different groups express in this world, I think our lives will be thickened. Our experience will be thickened. And so I'm going to talk about that. Now, I'm going to say paradoxically just for a second, though. When I first started education, I remember my mentor was very clear with me. As the old Kiowa elder told me, he said, "Now, I want to tell you something. As a Native American person, you better be ethnocentric." He said, "You better be ethnocentric in the way you live your life." I know it's real popular and real liberal for everybody to be really open to all the different cultures. And he says, but I can guarantee you, you'll lose your own way. And the words he used, you'll go white if you open yourself up to that. You'll go white. And so I speak today with a bit of tension because we do know that how quickly Euro-American society can assimilate us into being the way they want us to be. And so maintaining a unique perspective is really important. And it's a constant battle. Nonetheless, I have been open to learning a lot from other cultures. And I'm going to talk about that. But hopefully from a perspective as a Native American person, as a Choctaw and Chalagi person. So let me begin to tell you about some of these over the next 30 minutes, some of the experiences that I've had. Let me begin with my experience and what I've learned with African American people. How can I thicken my life by being open to African American people? I've been lucky to have lots of African American friends and professors and teachers throughout my life, and I've learned a whole bunch from them. But I think if I talk in terms of my love of jazz music, I might be able to talk to you about it using that as a concept in a better way than I normally could. And maybe in a way that you may be able to incorporate into your teaching and the way you live your life as well. As you probably know, jazz music is largely an African American artistic expression. We know Jewish people have had tremendous impact on it as well. When you look through the great jazz composers, we know as Choctaw people, we were involved too. Down in Louisiana and Mississippi, those stomp dances, those call dances influenced early jazz music. And it's acknowledged now. So nonetheless, it's largely an African American expression. And many people would say that jazz music is the greatest thing America has ever produced. the greatest thing that we've ever produced as an American country, as the United States, had to give the rest of the world. The greatest thing. And I tend to agree with that. I think that's our greatest offering to the world is jazz music as a country. And when you think about Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, Billie Holiday, all of these people, and many, many more. And if you know anything about the music and really listen to it, I'm not talking about turning it and letting it be background music. Jazz music is not for people who listen to music like that. Jazz music is not for people who want to hear a refrain over and over again like rock and roll music. It's not for people like that. It's music that you have to really, really listen to. It's very mystical. It's an incredible, sophisticated type of music, that and beauty, that if integrated into your life and into your teaching, I guarantee it'll change the way you do it. This African American contribution is that powerful. When you think about African Americans first being brought over here as slaves and put on plantations, you might recall just through history books just how incredibly difficult it was to just survive. I was recently in North Carolina on a plantation, and I was hearing these horror stories about these slaves getting their one woman getting her legs cut off from the knee at the knee so that she couldn't run off anymore. And it was horrible. And the person that was leading was doing his dissertation on the way the sermons that were preached during that time, because there was a lot of restlessness there, and a lot of the sermons kept preaching forgiveness, so that these African Americans wouldn't rebel against these people there. And then he talked about that for a while, and then he began to talk about this is where they danced. This is where they had their incredible celebrations over here. This is where they used this kind of music. Then he started talking about he said, now, one of the big problems is the food. He said, like they would have these big hog cookout things, but they'd only give African Americans the bones, and they'd get the meat off of it. And they'd get the seconds after big festivals that the landowners would have. They'd just give those kind of things. And they always got the worst food. And so what they have to do, they just have to make do with what they had, barely enough food to survive on. And so this is what they were confronted with. And just think about how incredible this was. These people, these slaves, were confronted with having to make do with what they had in order to survive, and for them to live joyously anyway. Damn. That's incredible, isn't it? You know how they did it? They learned who they were through improvising. They had to take what food they had, they had to take what clothes they had, what the hand-me-downs of everything, and they had to improvise to come up with the kind of good food to cook for their kids and their families so they could be strong. And they improvised with the knowledge of an incredibly frightening future in front of them. In the context of all those things, they had to improvise. They, in essence, had to strike a deal with the devil. And they're not talking about the devil like some people talk about it. I'm not talking about the devil of some cartoon character that's in some kind of mythology. I'm talking about real evil that they had to face every single day as slavery, as being punished, having all sorts of negativity thrown their way. And they were dealing with that devil that European people like Goethe had to deal with in Faust, like Melville had to deal with in Moby Dick, like Marlowe had to when they plunged into the depths of their soul. Well, this was everyday occurrence for these African American people. This evil, this devil, was a very real presence. The evils of slavery, prejudice, discrimination. And what do they come out with? They come out with this incredible tension that they're dealing with. They come up with improvisation. And it eventually led to the accumulation of the wisdom that led to possibly the greatest thing America has ever produced in history. Jazz music. That most people won't understand very much because it takes too much effort. I mean, it's hard to get to like jazz music. You get in there and you listen to some of it, you listen, God, I don't get it. God, this is just stupid. And then eventually something hits, and the mystical element touches something deep inside of you. But it isn't just that we can learn. Improvisation, and that making that a part of every classroom that you teach, and the importance of improvisation. It's not just that. Think about jazz in this way too, in terms of your classrooms. Think about what happens in jazz. The other night, I've had this dream like 4 times. In my dreams, I'm African American. It's great. I love it. I'm African American. I'm in a living room. And I'm in the living room, I'm sitting there, and I have a horn. It's a trumpet. And there's another person with another instrument, another person with another instrument, all these instruments around me, jazz instruments. And I'm sitting there, and they start playing. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, I can play jazz. I can play jazz. This is incredible. But as I'm sitting there, I start thinking, where's the space going to come so that I can get in there? And so I start waiting there, waiting to improvise the art that I have inside of me, negotiating the agendas with these really powerful people in this group, because, they all have their strong agendas. Think about Desi Gillespie, think about Charlie Parker, and Miles Davis in the same group. They were. They're all there together, and they're all they all have their own agendas, they all have their own genius, and they're waiting for their turn to play. Well, there I was in the living room getting to do exactly that, waiting for my turn. But I had to learn I had to negotiate in this group. I had to negotiate for when to play, when to listen. I had to negotiate how I was going to present my own agenda. And then in the dream, I also knew I didn't like a couple of the people in the room. And so I thought, my gosh, I really don't like that person, and I'm in conflict with them. But you know what? As a jazz artist, there has to be harmony. Somehow or another, in this conflict, I've got to find harmony with these people. I've got to listen to them. I've got to get in the moment. I've got to know when to get out of the way. I've got to know when to get in there and how I'm going to fit in. I've got to know how that person breathes and how that person's going to express his personality and how that's going to look when I express my personality, when I have something to say. Because if I don't, nothing will work. You got to figure out how you fit in a group. And you got to learn how to deal with other people in a jazz group. And you got to hope something unexpected will happen. Because if something unexpected doesn't happen in jazz music, it's crap. That's the whole point. Jazz music is improvisation. You can't. Have you ever heard John Coltrane sing? He just starts going crazy. He starts putting all these things inside the different spaces. He starts creating things you would never believe could be put in those spaces. And you start listening to it, and you realize. Then he comes back to, and he says beautiful things like, "That was the most beautiful melody, but it could be jazzed up a little bit." And so he did. He took it and he jazzed it up and turned it into something. One of the most extraordinary jazz songs ever done before. This kind of gift that he had to offer. He had to know when to push, when to pull back. Jazz is dialogue. That's what it is. And the gift always comes when you don't expect it, and it's not what you expect it to be. I remember being in a classroom a few years ago, and I have a lot of literature in my class. I bring a lot of literature. We were reading Kafka at the time, and personality disorders class. Not that Kafka had a personality disorder, but you might think he would with that surrealistic stuff he writes. Well, we were reading it. We're talking about the different influences of how this person, we're trying to analyze his character. And one person says, in the sparks of creative discussion, one of the persons in class says, he worked in a bank. He worked in a bank. The main character in the trial, Kay, and he worked in the bank. Oh my gosh. That opened up the discussion to things, to unexpected ways. All of a sudden we were talking about things like capitalism. How is that impacting this personality disorder that we're talking about in class? How is that socioeconomic influencing this person? And so it opened up all sorts of things. And that's what happens in groups where people know how to breathe with each other, how to accept each other's differences, how to honor those kind of things, and even dislike each other and be competitive with each other, but still give each other space to offer their gift. Let me talk about that for a second in terms of Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. And I won't stay long on this, but I think they're good examples. You have a person like Duke Ellington, when he put his bands together, and he'd start seeing them fight with each other. And he didn't jump in and stop it. He would use it as a competitive situation to bring out the best in the person in the band. And so he created all sorts of these situations that he actually promoted, but he would watch over them to make sure. But he knew how to allow this kind of music to emerge out of battles between outcasts within a group. Now, what Duke Ellington did, though, when he did create this music, when he put these kind of people here, one of the things that happened was something incredible. Out of this competitive stuff, he understood it had a sexual aspect to it. There's nobody ever that wrote as carnal music as Duke Ellington. It's sensual. It's in ways unimaginable to anybody before Duke Ellington came along. It's incredibly sensuous music. He knew, and this is something we can learn from African American people, I think, speaking in general terms, is that all knowledge starts with the attraction to the body. The body knowledge. Body knowledge. I'm sure I wouldn't talk about this, but when I went out to on my Humblacha, one of the things that I learned at my vision quest, I learned that I was a person of the west. I was west southern, not southwest western, west southern, which means I'm less this direction, which means that I am a person of that all my knowledge must first come through my body. That I'm a body person. I'm a person that emerges. His knowledge emerges first out of the body, then it goes into other kind of things. So I really connected with this with Duke Ellington. He's my very favorite. That intelligence is about the bodies of men and women and the attraction between each other. And for him, even larger relationship to God for him. He's not the first person to say that. William Blake makes the comment at one point. He says, all wisdom begins with touch. Think about children, babies. The first thing they do. All knowledge begins with touch. What a beautiful thing to remember. Is kinesthetic learning important? According to Duke Ellington, it is touch. And William Blake says, and what is the greatest playwright in the 20th century? Bertolt Brecht says, he says, think crudely, think complexly. And when he's talking about crudely, he's talking about having the guts to think crudely about stuff, to think sexually about stuff, to tap into the deepest part of who we are, our ids, our bodies, and complexly too. But he says, think crudely, think complexly, and that's when you're going to get where you need to be. And then the last jazz person I want to mention is another person who I learned so much from is when we talk about the perspective we're talking about, Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong brings this incredible spiritual aspect to what he does. He enters into the deepest human feeling about things, and he has a capacity to always express love. Where he sings things like, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. You remember he's walking along and he sees the people, hello here, hello there. And it's a light song, and he dies eventually there, not so long after that. But he was always compassionate. He always loved that beautiful smile that he had. He had a centeredness where he knew how to get to the Holy of Holies. He did it with the body. He understood the song Black and Blue. This famous song Black and Blue. It's one of the probably 25 most important songs of the 20th century. If you haven't heard it, you got to listen to it. It's about him being prejudice and discrimination beating him up, about being black and blue, and he complains. He talks about being black. He uses the word black. He's black. And yet, out of this kind of song where he's beat up with prejudices comes this profound meaning and these delicious juices that comes right out of his centeredness, where he is sweet, dark, beautiful sounds. I was listening to Wynton Marsalis, and Wynton Marsalis tells the story about when he met for the first time Big Spiderback, supposedly the greatest Euro-American jazz person. And if you know the story, Bick was incredibly prejudiced. He came from this well-off family, and he was incredibly prejudiced. He hated black people. He thought they were stupid. He often made comments they were incapable of subtleties. They were incapable of creating subtly beautiful sounds and music. And he is just really well known for his ignorance and stupidity and hatred of African American people. But he was sitting on the dock one day in New Orleans, and there was one of those boats come up, and there was a jazz band playing, and he's sitting there, and he hears this sound, and it's the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. It could have came right from heaven. He said he was listening there, and he heard it. It was the most beautiful sound he heard, and he pulls up. It's a trumpet. He climbs up on the boat, and he walks into the boat, and he sees this African American man named Louis Armstrong blasting away in a tone that only he can achieve with a loudness. You know how loud Louis plays, so loud and so powerful. Few people even since him have ever been able to play that loud. And he looks at him and he says, "I knew I couldn't do that." He said, "I knew I couldn't do that." And so what he was faced with all his envy, he was faced with all his shame, his reverence, and he was faced with unexpected love toward a black man that he had always said these horrible things about. And now he was faced with the possibility of accepting the humanity of African American people. Often we put ourselves outside of that. We're not like that. And then the next conversation you talk about how you hate rap music, or you talk about how much you hate hip-hop music, or some other incredibly beautiful thing that African Americans offer us. And it hasn't changed. It just keeps going on. We keep not accepting these incredibly beautiful things that African Americans have to offer us. But it's there. And if we're open-minded enough, and if we'll listen, it's like when people tell me Bob Dylan can't sing. I know I'm prejudiced. I love Bob Dylan. Listen to his voice. He does things with his voice that are unbelievable. He was voted the best white singer of the 20th century by Rolling Stone. So maybe I got something to get vindication of it. But listen. Listen to the voice. Listen to the jazz music. Listen and be open to these kind of influences, and your life will change. You'll teach your classes differently with some of the points that I'm just making about interacting with the way people can interact. You might emphasize certain values that I've just mentioned also. I need to move on because I've got a couple more that I'm going to mention, and I've got maybe 10 minutes or so to go. Let me go now to Asian Americans and the impact that Asian Americans have had. I've been really lucky to have G as one of my very best friends in the whole world. And I learned so much from her. It's unbelievable. We're together all the time. And other Asian American friends I've been lucky to have. And I always tell people if there's such a thing as previous lives, I know that's where I lived for a long time because I love so many things about Asian cultures, and I've learned so much. But let me use Taoism as the as the main metaphor to talk about that for a second. Taoism, as you may know, emphasizes not following rules because they're artificial, and instead they advocate getting beneath the rules to become a person who acts out of natural virtue and natural inner feelings. I mean, it isn't that they deny that rules shouldn't be there for most people, but if you want to go to a higher level of being, you get beyond that and you act out of the free verdict of your heart, out of love and connection to everything, not out of moral codes. The person who has to compel themselves to be civilized, they argue, is probably a person who's pretty rigid, and they're probably not tapping into genius, because genius is always something beyond rules. It's not an anti-social spirit with hostile intent. It's a fountain of creative work. It's an intelligent questioning of rules. And Bob Dylan just spoke to me. He said, "To live outside the law, you must be honest. To live outside the law, you must be honest." Think about that. That's totally Taoism. Think about it. To live outside the law, you must be honest. You know, if you're going to be authentic, you can't be following all the customs and be conforming to all of the unwritten rules and written rules that are given to you all the time. Incredible message for our students, isn't it? Go beyond the conventional. Go beyond that. Take risks. Try to look at things outside the box. To live outside the law, you must be honest. In fact, if you're living according to all the conventions and all the laws, you're probably not being very authentic. Because you're not living on the free virtue of your own heart and mind. You're living according to something external to you that's being forced upon you, and you don't even realize it. You know, just think about how much we've all been attracted to people who are less academic, less dutiful, less perfect. There's a higher plane of joyous playing and naturalness that we're drawn to. There's something true about it, even comic sometimes. And we're drawn to that over those people who pretend, who are all calculating and detached and in doing what they're supposed to all the time. And those are the very people that engage in ill treatment of everything that is natural. Wilhelm Reich wrote a lot about the armored personality, the stiff personality that follows the rules all the time, and describes them in interesting ways. They're people who go by the book. They go by the letter of the law. They, let's see, what are some other phrases? They go, they always talk about integrity. And he says, those people are thieves. Wilhelm Reich says, those people are thieves. They steal their virtue from somebody else. It doesn't come out of who they are. They don't tap into what's really real. They're thieves, he says. They don't allow their true natures to emerge. They're too preoccupied with what's right and wrong. So they have these kind of problems. Taoists say, go so deep inside yourself that you're really authentic and really living out of that honesty that we're talking about. Not being constantly preoccupied with how you're supposed to be, but living out of the free verdict of your own heart and mind. Okay, I'm going pretty fast now. Latino and Latinos. Let me talk about that for a second. I just got back from Mexico. Sure. We have some Latinos here, which is really neat. I'm really happy. And let me talk about that for a second. One of the things that come to mind that we can learn from Hispanic people is a balance between festival and work. It's one of the things I've learned personally. It's been very important to me. I have a friend who's been here about 10 years and lived off and on in Mexico. He was born there. And he's constantly talking and reminiscing about Mexico. He's always talking. He said, yeah, in Mexico we had dances all the time. And there was always these lively songs in public places. And he says that's the thing he misses the most. He said he recalls times like being in large meadows where they had these big festivals all the time. And they had them all the time. Any excuse there was for a party, they would have a party, he said. And he said they lived for those moments. They lived to joyously express themselves. Party, festival, just like what y'all are doing here. The people who organized this. You organized a festival. And I'm the last person who ever has a right to judge anyone, because what was the day before yesterday, Cal and I were in a meeting, and I said, somebody had asked me, what's your favorite foods? And I said, hot dogs and popcorn. And I smelled popcorn. And there was popcorn downstairs, and y'all were serving the popcorn, but I was too busy with my work and to go down and get the popcorn, but Cal wasn't. Cal went down and got some popcorn. But festival, to live, to celebrate life. That's an important joy, a great joy. He talks about women being dressed lavishly in bright colors. He talks about them acting bashful, but really being incredibly powerful, presenting themselves at these festivals, and the guys there as well, looking for potential wives, and them, others looking for husbands. He talks about the teasing that would go on between the sexes, and these women that would appear bashful, but they had an attitude, he said. And the women would often have solidarity groups at these festivals, and during the parades and guitars and drums, they would kind of hang out together. And he says that while the guys kind of walked through the parties merrymaking with alcohol or whatever, with the floats and costumes all around them, but they lived for these times, for these boisterous times in their life, and it was encouraged to express that ecstasy, and that it was okay in those kind of environments. And that's something I think we lost. But we're not today, are we? We're not today. We're celebrating diversity. We're actually doing this incredible festival of diversity day. And tonight, it's fantastic. But balanced with this, in Hispanic culture, for me, the influence on me, is hard work and art. Hard work, I grew up really poor. Some of you guys know some of my story. I was extraordinarily poor. I was in special ed until the 3rd grade. Not probably because my mind wasn't real fast, because we just lived in such utter poverty. We didn't have a bathroom. We had no running water or anything. And I just never was around people who read books. We had no books and stuff. But anyway, I lived in a lot of poverty. But I learned some things growing up about hard work and how important it was. I learned about how important it was to feel the vitality of life, to sweat, and to do something really hard. Well, when I'm around Hispanic people, the migrant workers I worked with when I was in junior high and high school, when I did irrigation work to make what money we could in the carpentry work, when I worked with carpenters, I always worked with migrant workers. And, I always felt horrible, because these people were incredibly skilled. You look around and you see these people working, migrant workers, they're often incredibly skilled workers. They're really good, and they're brilliant about what they do. And so I'd be working with them, and they would be so much faster than me. They would work so much harder than me, and they didn't get paid shit. And it made me so angry. I remember growing up thinking how unfair this was, and how horrible it was, these incredibly skilled workers getting paid next to nothing. But you know what? They made up for it with the camaraderie. We laughed, and it was so much fun hanging out with them. And they laughed, and they told stories. They taught me some dirty Spanish words. That was a blast. And we enjoyed the sweaty and vigorous work and camaraderie that we had. And more in our field of education, more and more. This is true, because some of us have. We know this is true. We're more and more alienated from working people. More and more alienated. We come into academic situations, and we really don't understand where they're coming from. These people who cherish this kind of work and have done it all their life. And we need healing from it. We need to be more connected to hardworking people. And we're not often done. It's not often that way. Okay, to finish with Hispanic people, the art part of it. I love art from Mexico. I've made several trips for no other reason to go to Mexico City, just to see Frida's and especially Frida's art, because I get to see Diego Rivera's at other places. Like I went to Detroit, and who's the other fresco painter? The second next to I went to Dartmouth 10 years in a row, and every year I go to the library and I just sit and look at their extraordinary frescoes that are so incredible. But let me talk about that just for a second. In the 15th century, you had the Renaissance in the 15th, 16th century. And everybody knows about how great their frescoes are. But in the 20th century, this little country south of us, Mexico, produced some of the greatest frescoes ever in history. In this little country called Mexico, right after the Mexican Revolution, in total scarcity, economic scarcity, these people emerged. And these people emerged that did this incredibly difficult kind of art that if you make one mistake, you have to wipe it all out and start over. And every single day you do it, you can only do so much because it'll dry, you know. And so there's a whole lot of work that goes into it. And so what does he do when he goes to Detroit? Maybe his greatest work, he paints about the worker. You know, and Diego Rivera, and he did this monumental tribute to the worker. Every event in the worker's day is represented as heroic and monumental, from punching the clock through steel processing, molding, welding, drilling. Even the lunch break is celebrated, and the assembly line is celebrated, and this incredible contribution he makes to us and helping us understand the importance of work, beauty, and festival. So if we can kind of tap into those things, it'd be great. I have two more, but it looks like I've run out of time. I'll just say that I wrote this up just for this occasion. I wanted something celebratory rather than judge in any way mean-spirited. I hope that it came across that way. I've done a couple others on different groups that were really important to me. I'm sorry I don't have time to go into those right now, but from an American Indian perspective, I know my mentor told me you have to be careful about being more than ethnocentric. You got to remain ethnocentric to maintain your ways, because he guaranteed me no one would be supporting me to keep those ways in any situation. They will always be talking in English to you. They won't talk to you in Choctaw. They're not going to talk to you about the latest business, politics in the Choctaw Nation. Nobody's going to talk with. Nobody's going to like the music you like. It's not that music that you have to offer. He said, so you have to remain ethnocentric. Well, I really respect that, Stuart, and I love that, and I'm keeping that. It's something that's important to me. But I've been enriched a lot by hanging out with you guys. Euro-Americans, Asian Americans, I'm looking around, African Americans. I had something with people in the Mideast, and probably the biggest influence is the gay lesbian community. I meet with gay lesbian group every month, 20 people. It just started happening. Gay lesbian people started coming to my house, and my wife in my house, and now it's grown to 20 people every single month, and it was sort of like a shelter. But you know what? We get to celebrate this week. Oh my God. Great thing happened this week. And I got to celebrate each little victory they've had. It's been so great to be able to do that. But I didn't get to talk about all of those, but there's all sorts of influences that we can open ourselves up and thicken our life stories before we do. If you're not into these other cultures and trying to go to Mexico City to see the artwork, you're missing out on something. If you're not reading Taoism, you're missing out on something. If you don't appreciate jazz music, start off with John Coltrane. Or Miles Davis is a little easier to get going on. Some of his slower, well, not his hip-hop stuff early, but Sketches for Spain is easy to get going, don't you think? I see some jazzers in here. Some people, jazz music. But you can start with that, you guys. Thank you so much for choosing me to do this talk. It's ridiculous. There's about 50 people in here that would have done better. So thank you so much. Wadao.